He used to rule Seoul's underworld with an iron fist. Money, power, territory. He had commanded it all from his penthouse throne in Gangnam. Politicians feared his phone calls. Rival gangs trembled at the mention of his name. He had believed himself invincible, untouchable, a king among men who had clawed his way up from nothing to everything. But he had been wrong about everything. It wasn't the fall from power that changed him. It wasn't the betrayal that stripped him of his empire in a single night. It wasn't even the weeks spent hiding like a rat in the walls of a run-down apartment building, watching his former kingdom crumble from afar. It was her, Marta, a woman who had nothing but gave him everything. She changed his life in seconds with one simple act of grace that shattered every belief he had built his existence upon. Sonja had learned that true wealth isn't measured by what you possess, but by who you become. That real power isn't domination. It's serving others with genuine love. That the people who transform your life aren't always the powerful ones sitting on thrones. Sometimes they're the humble ones mopping floors, showing you what true strength really looks like when you've forgotten how to recognize it. He had lost his money, his status, his criminal empire, and it was the greatest gift of his life. Because in losing everything, he found himself. He found purpose. He found peace. He found people who actually mattered, not because they feared him, but because they chose to stand beside him. His name was Sonja. He used to be a king. Now he was just a man. And for the first time in his 42 years, that was more than enough. But to understand how he got here, we need to go back to the night he lost everything. Please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that will change how you see the world. Drop a comment below telling us what transformation you're working toward in your own life. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sonja's penthouse like bullets, but inside, everything gleamed with the polish of obscene wealth. Marble floors reflected the crystal chandeliers. Priceless artwork adorned walls that had witnessed countless deals sealed with blood and intimidation. This was the apex of Seoul's underworld, and Sonja sat at its center like a spider in a web of corruption. He swirled expensive whiskey in a crystal glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. Across from him, Jae-sung Kim stood with perfect posture, his tailored suit immaculate, his expression neutral. Jae-sung had been his right-hand man for 7 years, the closest thing to a friend that Sonja allowed himself in this world where trust was a liability. The shipment arrives at dawn, Jae-sung reported, his voice smooth and professional. The ports are secured. The police have been paid. Everything is in place. Sonja nodded, satisfied. This deal would cement his control over the entire southern district. Cobra, his primary rival, would be left with scraps. It was a beautiful strategy, months in the making, and it would end with his complete dominance of Seoul's criminal landscape. And Cobra's response? Sonja asked, though he already knew the answer. Nothing. He's gone quiet. Accepting defeat, it seems. That should have been his first warning. Cobra never accepted anything quietly. But Sonja was too confident, too secure in his own invincibility. He had built this empire from nothing, starting as a teenager on the streets, fighting for every scrap, every inch of territory. He had survived poverty that would have broken most men. He had survived violence that should have killed him a dozen times over. He had survived by being smarter, more ruthless, more willing to do whatever it took. He trusted no one completely, loved no one, allowed himself no weakness. Power was everything. Fear was his currency, and he had accumulated more of both than any crime lord in Seoul's history. Good, Sonja said, finishing his drink. Then tomorrow we... His phone buzzed. Young-woo, his driver and personal bodyguard. The man never called unless it was urgent. Boss, we have a problem. Young-woo's voice was tight with tension. The police just raided 3 of our warehouses simultaneously. They knew exactly where to look. They have everything, records, inventory names. Sonja's blood turned to ice. What? It's a setup, boss. Someone gave them everything. You need to leave now. They're coming for you. Before Sonja could respond, he heard sirens. Multiple vehicles getting closer. His eyes snapped to Jae-sung, who stood there with the same neutral expression, But now Songja saw it clearly, the satisfaction barely hidden behind those cold eyes. You, Songja breathed, everything clicking into place with devastating clarity. Jae-sung smiled then, an expression of pure triumph. Me? Did you really think I'd spend my life as your lapdog forever? You taught me well, Songja. Take what you want. Trust no one. The strong survive by destroying the weak. I made you everything you are, and now I'm taking everything you have, Jae-sung replied, backing toward the door. Your accounts are frozen. Your men have been told you betrayed them to the police. Cobra sends his regards. We've been planning this together for 6 months. By tomorrow, your empire will be mine, and you'll be either dead or in prison. Either way works for me. The sirens were deafening now. Songja had seconds to decide. Fight or flight. Pride screamed at him to stay, to face this head-on, to show them he wasn't afraid. But survival instinct, honed by decades on the streets, overrode everything else. He ran. Young-woo was waiting in the garage, engine already running. Get in. The loyal driver had been with him for 15 years, one of the few men Songja actually trusted, which in his world meant he trusted him slightly more than everyone else, which was not at all. They peeled out just as police vehicles swarmed the building. Young-woo drove like a demon through Seoul streets, weaving through traffic, taking corners that made the tires scream. Behind them, the pursuit continued relentlessly. Where can we go? Songja demanded, his mind racing through options that were dwindling by the second. Safe house in no one. Nobody knows about it except me. They almost made it. The roadblock appeared out of nowhere, a wall of police vehicles with armed officers taking position. Young-woo cursed and jerked the wheel, sending them careening down a narrow alley. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets sparking off metal and concrete. The car fishtailed as Young-woo pushed it to its limits, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Hold on, Young-woo shouted, spotting an exit route through a construction site. They crashed through wooden barriers, the car airborne for a heart-stopping moment before slamming back down. The suspension groaned but held. They emerged onto a quieter street. The sirens faded slightly. For a moment, Songja thought they might actually escape. Then he saw the checkpoint ahead. More police, clearly positioned and waiting. They knew, Songja said numbly. They knew every route we'd take. There's one more way, Young-woo said grimly, yanking the wheel toward a service road that led to the industrial district. But boss, you need to listen to me. When we get close to the safe house, you run. Don't wait, don't look back. I'll lead them away. Young-woo, you gave me a life when I had nothing. Young-woo interrupted, his voice fierce. Let me give you something back. You're not dying tonight, you understand? You're going to survive this, rebuild, and make them all pay. But Songja wasn't sure he wanted to rebuild anymore. As the city blurred past, as his empire crumbled in real time, as everything he'd spent 20 years building dissolved like smoke, he felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood. Genuine fear. Not fear of death, but fear of meaninglessness. If his empire was gone, what was he? Who was he? Young-woo's phone buzzed continuously. Text after text from their crew. Songja watched his driver's face grow grimmer with each message. What? Songja demanded. They're all turning boss. Jae-sung is offering double to anyone who stays loyal to him. Those who refuse are being eliminated. He's moving fast, consolidating everything before dawn. Songja's jaw clenched. In one night, everything he'd built was being dismantled. Every loyalty he'd purchased with fear or money was evaporating. He believed himself a king, but he'd only ever been a tyrant, and tyrants had no true allies, only subjects waiting for the right moment to rebel. They reached the industrial district, a maze of warehouses and shipping containers. Young-woo killed the lights, navigating by memory through the darkness. Behind them, the sirens had multiplied. Helicopters thumped overhead, searchlights cutting through the night. There, Young-woo pointed to a crumbling apartment building at the edge of the district. 4th floor, apartment 403. Keys under the mat. Cash hidden in the bathroom vent. Enough for maybe a month if you're careful. He pulled up to the building's rear entrance. Go. Now. Young-woo, go. The driver's eyes were fierce, desperate. Let me do this one thing right. I've done terrible things for you, boss. Let me do one good thing. Song-ja grabbed his driver's shoulder, words failing him. Young-woo was probably the closest thing he'd had to a friend in this life, though he'd never admitted it, never showed weakness by acknowledging that bond. Thank you, Song-ja managed. Young-woo nodded once, then gunned the engine. The car roared away, deliberately loud, drawing attention. Song-ja ran for the building, his expensive shoes slipping on wet pavement. Behind him, he heard the chase resume, vehicles converging on Young-woo's car. Then gunfire. A lot of it. A crash. Screaming metal and shouting voices. Song-ja wanted to look back, but forced himself forward. Fourth floor. Apartment 403. His legs burned as he climbed the stairs of the dark, decrepit building. It smelled of mold and desperation, so different from his penthouse that it might as well have been another planet. The key was where Young-woo said. Song-ja slipped inside and locked the door, his hands shaking. The apartment was barely furnished. A mattress on the floor, a small kitchen, a bathroom with cracked tiles. This was what rock bottom looked like. He moved to the grimy window and peered out carefully. Below, police vehicles surrounded Young-woo's car. He couldn't see clearly, but there was an ambulance, officers clustered around something on the ground. Song-ja's chest tightened. Young-woo, his loyal driver who'd given everything to buy him these precious minutes of freedom. For 3 weeks, Song-ja existed in that apartment like a ghost. He found the cash in the bathroom vent, 200,000 won, not even enough for a month, not the way prices were in Seoul. He rationed it carefully, venturing out only at night, stealing food when he could, buying the bare minimum when he couldn't. His face was all over the news. Notorious crime, Lord Song-ja, wanted for multiple murders, racketeering, human trafficking. They'd pinned everything on him, crimes he'd actually committed and dozens he hadn't. Jae-sung had been thorough. There would be no coming back from this through legal means. Every night, Song-ja watched from his window as his former empire continued without him. He watched news reports showing Jae-sung being interviewed, playing the reformed gangster who was cleaning up the organization from within. He watched as his clubs were raided, his businesses shut down or seized. He watched as everyone he'd ever commanded forgot he existed. His reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror showed a stranger. Unshaven, gaunt, hollow-eyed. The expensive suit he'd been wearing that last night hung off him now, filthy and torn. He looked like what he'd always secretly feared he was: nothing. Nobody. A man whose entire identity had been built on sand. The anger came first. Rage at Jae-sung's betrayal, at Cobra's victory, at the unfairness of losing everything so quickly. He punched the wall until his knuckles bled, screaming into pillows so the neighbors wouldn't hear. He planned elaborate revenges, schemes to reclaim his throne, violent fantasies of making them all pay. But gradually, the anger faded into something worse: emptiness. What was the point? Even if he somehow rebuilt, even if he destroyed Jae-sung and Cobra, then what? Another decade of paranoia, of sleeping with one eye open, of trusting no one and being trusted by no one. Another decade of accumulating power that could vanish in a single night of betrayal. For the first time in his adult life, Song-ja contemplated simply ending it. There was a certain peace in that thought. No more running, no more fear, no more meaningless struggle. He stood on the apartment's small balcony one night, for stories up, and looked down at the concrete below. It would be so easy. Excuse me. The voice startled him so badly he nearly fell. Song-ja spun around to see a woman standing in his doorway. She was black, probably in her late 20s, wearing a simple cleaning uniform with her hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her eyes were warm and concerned, completely unafraid despite the fact that she'd just walked in on a wanted criminal. The door was unlocked, she explained in accented Korean, her voice gentle. I'm Marta. I clean this building. I've seen you around. Are you okay? Song-ja's survival instincts kicked in immediately. His hand moved toward the knife he kept in his pocket, every muscle tensing for confrontation. Get out, he growled, his voice hoarse from weeks of barely speaking. But Marta didn't move. She simply stood there, holding a bag that smelled like food, studying him with those warm, unflinching eyes. "You're the one from the news," she said matter-of-factly. "Sonja, the crime boss everyone's looking for." I said, "Get out." His hand gripped the knife handle. "Unless you want to call the police? Collect the reward? Go ahead. I'm done running." "I brought you food," Marta replied, setting the bag on the small counter. "Rice, kimchi, some meat. You look like you haven't eaten properly in weeks." Sonja stared at her, completely thrown off balance. This made no sense. People didn't just bring food to wanted criminals. People didn't risk their own safety for strangers. People were selfish, calculating, always angling for advantage. That was the fundamental truth he'd built his entire worldview on. "What do you want?" he demanded. "Money? Protection? You think I still have power to give you something?" Marta's expression softened with something that looked like pity, which made Sonja's pride flare with anger. "I don't want anything. You're clearly in trouble, and you look hungry. That's enough reason to help. Nobody helps for free." "I do," she said simply. She moved toward the door, then paused. "I'll be back tomorrow. Try to eat something. And please, step back from that balcony. Whatever you're thinking, there are better answers." Then she was gone, leaving Sonja standing there feeling like the ground had shifted under his feet. He approached the bag cautiously, as if it might explode. Inside, he found still warm food, more than he'd eaten in days. His stomach growled traitorously. He wanted to throw it away, to maintain his pride, to reject this inexplicable charity. But he was so hungry, and the food smelled like something he'd forgotten existed. Kindness without strings attached, even if he couldn't understand it. He ate, and despite himself, he cried while he did, tears mixing with rice. All the emotion he'd locked away for weeks pouring out in that grimy apartment, while he consumed a meal bought by a stranger who owed him nothing. Marta returned next day, and the day after that. Each time, she brought food. Each time, Sonja tried to maintain his walls, his suspicion, his certainty that this was some kind of trick or angle. But Marta never asked for anything. She'd bring the food, sometimes stay to chat if he let her, and then leave to continue her cleaning work. "Why are you doing this?" he finally asked on the fourth day, frustrated by his inability to understand her motivations. Marta was sitting on the floor across from him, sharing the meal she'd brought. "Because everyone deserves kindness," she said. "Even people who've done bad things. Maybe especially them, because they've probably never experienced real kindness before. You don't know what I've done. I know what the news says. I know you hurt people, controlled them through fear, built an empire on suffering." She met his eyes directly. "I also know you're human, and humans can change if they choose to." Sonja laughed bitterly. "Change? Into what? I'm nothing now. Everything I was is gone." "Maybe what you were needed to be gone," Marta said gently. "Maybe this is your chance to become something better. There's no coming back from what I've done. Maybe not to power and crime. But there's always a path to redemption if you're brave enough to walk it." She stood, brushing off her uniform. "I have a proposal. I need help with my cleaning work. The building manager keeps adding more apartments to my route, but pays the same. I can't do it all alone anymore. Work with me. I'll split what I make. It's not much, but it's honest." The suggestion was so absurd that Sonja actually laughed. A real laugh this time. "You want me, someone who commanded hundreds of men, who controlled half of Seoul's underworld, to clean toilets? I want you to do honest work for honest pay," Marta corrected. "I want you to feel what it's like to earn something through helping rather than hurting. What's your choice? You can keep hiding in this apartment, eating my charity, contemplating that balcony. Or you could try something different." After she left, Sonja sat in the growing darkness, wrestling with his pride. Clean toilets? Mop floors? Carry other people's trash? Everything in him rebelled against the idea. He was Sonja. He was a king, or had been. This was beneath him. But what was he now, really? A fugitive living off a stranger's charity, too proud to work, but too afraid to show his face. At least the work would keep him alive. At least it would give him something to do besides descend into madness in this tiny apartment. The next morning, when Marta knocked, he opened the door. "Fine," he said. "I'll help, but just until I figure out my next move." Marta smiled, a genuine expression of joy that Songja found inexplicably moving. That's all I ask. Come on, we start with the third-floor apartments. The first day of honest work in Songja's entire adult life was humiliating beyond measure. Marta gave him gloves, cleaning supplies, and a list of tasks. Scrubbing toilets, mopping floors, wiping down windows, taking out trash. His back ached within hours. His hands, once soft from luxury, developed blisters. The tenants who saw him barely acknowledged his existence, treating him like furniture, invisible and irrelevant. This was what being nobody felt like. This was life without power, without fear as currency. It was degrading, exhausting, and Songja hated every second of it. But he also noticed things he'd never paid attention to before. The elderly woman in 302 who struggled to walk, her apartment immaculate, because Marta helped her clean every week. The single mother in 315 working 3 jobs, her children doing homework at a kitchen table Marta always made sure to wipe extra carefully. The disabled veteran in 308 whose government checks barely covered rent, whom Marta sometimes slipped extra food to when she thought no one was watching. These were people Songja had never seen as people before. In his old life, they would have been marks, opportunities for exploitation, or simply beneath his notice. But watching Marta interact with them, seeing the genuine care she showed everyone regardless of their status or ability to pay her back, something began to crack in Songja's hardened worldview. "How can you be happy doing this?" he asked during their lunch break, sitting on the stairwell, sharing the rice balls Marta had prepared. "You work 3 jobs, send most of your money home to Nigeria, live in a room smaller than my old closet. You have nothing." Marta considered the question thoughtfully, chewing her rice. "I have purpose," she finally said. "I'm putting my siblings through school back home. I'm helping people here who need it. I'm working toward my nursing degree. Every day, I make someone's life a little better, even if it's just by cleaning their home or listening to their problems. That's not nothing, Songja. That's everything. But don't you want more? Nice things, security, power to make your own choices. I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror and be proud of who I see," Marta replied. "I want to sleep peacefully at night, knowing I didn't hurt anyone to get ahead. I want to build something real, relationships, respect, a life that matters beyond just accumulating wealth. Don't you?" Songja had no answer. He never thought about life in those terms before. His entire existence had been about accumulation and control, about building walls high enough that nothing could hurt him, about being feared so thoroughly that he'd never have to be vulnerable again. "I never thought about it," he admitted quietly. "I was too busy surviving, then too busy conquering. I don't think I've ever actually stopped to ask what I wanted beyond more money, more power, more control." "Maybe that's why you lost it all," Marta said, not unkindly. "You can't hold on to things you've taken through force forever. But things you build through love and service, those last." Over the following weeks, Songja found himself watching Marta more closely. The way she greeted every tenant by name, remembering details about their lives. The way she took extra time with Mrs. Lee in 302, helping the elderly woman sort her medications and listening to stories about her late husband. The way she played with the children in 315, making them laugh even when their mother was stressed and exhausted. Marta sang while she worked, traditional Nigerian songs Songja didn't understand but found strangely comforting. She had this lightness about her, this joy that seemed completely disconnected from her circumstances. She should have been miserable, working herself to exhaustion, barely scraping by, facing discrimination and hardship in a country far from home. But instead, she radiated something Songja couldn't quite name. Peace, maybe. Contentment. As if she possessed something invisible but infinitely valuable. "You're staring again," Marta said one day, catching him watching her interact with young Minji from 315. The little girl had drawn her a picture, and Marta was praising it like it was a masterpiece headed for a museum. "I'm trying to understand you," Songja said honestly. "You don't make sense. Because I'm happy without being rich? Because you give everything and ask for nothing? That's not how the world works. Marta handed the picture back to Minji with a warm hug, then turned to Songja with an expression that was both sad and compassionate. Maybe that's not how your world worked. But there are other ways to live, Songja. Better ways. He wanted to argue, to defend the philosophy that had sustained him for decades. But the evidence was right in front of him. Marta had almost nothing materially, yet she seemed more content than he'd ever been sitting atop his empire. She was genuinely liked, not just feared. People smiled when they saw her coming, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Children hugged her. Elderly tenants shared their tea with her. Other workers in the building actually helped her sometimes, just because, in his entire life, Songja had never experienced that. People had obeyed him, feared him, maybe even respected his power. But nobody had ever been genuinely happy to see him. Nobody had hugged him. Nobody had shared anything with him without expecting something larger in return. He began working harder, not just going through the motions but actually putting effort into his tasks. He learned tenants' names, started noticing the small details, which apartments needed the windows cleaned more carefully, which elderly residents needed extra time and patience. He found himself using his old skills in new ways, fixing broken locks, intimidating an abusive landlord into backing off from a vulnerable family, using his knowledge of the building's structure to solve maintenance problems. "You're good at this," Marta observed one afternoon as they finished cleaning the hallway on the second floor. "The work, but also the people. You actually care now. I can see it." "I'm just doing what you showed me," Songja replied, uncomfortable with the praise. "No, you're choosing to do it. That's different. That's growth." She checked her watch. "We have one more apartment today. Mrs. Lee in 302. She's been having chest pains, so I want to check on her." They climbed to the third floor. Songja had his floors confused and knocked on Mrs. Lee's door. The elderly woman answered, and immediately Marta's expression shifted to concern. Mrs. Lee looked pale, her breathing labored. "Grandmother, you don't look well," Marta said gently, helping her back to her chair. "Have you been taking your heart medication?" Mrs. Lee's eyes filled with tears. "I couldn't afford to refill it this month. The rent went up, and my son's family. They can't help right now. I thought I could manage without it for a few weeks, but how much is the medication?" Marta asked immediately. 50,000 won. "But please, don't worry about me. I'll manage somehow. You do so much for me already." Marta pulled out her worn wallet and counted what was inside. Songja watched as she removed every bill, every coin, placing exactly 50,000 won into Mrs. Lee's trembling hands. "Marta!" "No," Mrs. Lee protested. "This is too much. You need this money. I need you to be healthy more," Marta said firmly, closing Mrs. Lee's fingers around the cash. "Promise me you'll get your medication today. Right now, if possible." Mrs. Lee wept, clutching Marta's hands. "You're an angel. God sent you to me. How can I ever repay you?" "By staying healthy and keeping me company during our cleaning sessions," Marta smiled. "That's all the payment I need." They left Mrs. Lee calling her pharmacy, and Songja felt something building inside him. Confusion, anger, disbelief. He waited until they were in the stairwell before turning on Marta. "What did you just do?" His voice was harsher than intended, but he couldn't contain it. "I helped someone who needed help," Marta said simply, continuing down the stairs. "That was your rent money." Songja grabbed her arm, stopping her. "I saw you counting it last night. You were short already, and now you've given away everything you had left." Mrs. Lee needed her heart medication more than I need my rent paid on time. "You'll be evicted. You'll starve. What happens when you can't work? Because you're homeless and hungry." His voice echoed in the stairwell, all his frustration and bewilderment pouring out. "How can you be so stupid? So reckless? She's not your responsibility." Marta pulled her arm free, turning to face him fully. Her eyes held no anger, only that infuriating compassion that made Songja feel like a child throwing a tantrum. "You still don't understand, do you?" "Understand what?" "That you're throwing your life away for people who can't give you anything back." "I understand that this is exactly why you lost everything," Marta said quietly, and her words hit Songja like a physical blow. "You spent your whole life taking what you wanted through power and fear. taking and hoarding and controlling, building walls and empires, accumulating more and more while trusting less and less. And where did it get you? Alone, betrayed, hiding in a rundown apartment with nothing and no one. I had everything, Songjia shouted. You had nothing that mattered. Marta's voice rose to match his, her composure finally cracking to show the passion underneath. Money you couldn't enjoy without paranoia. Power you couldn't use without making more enemies. Respect that was really just fear wearing a mask. You were rich, but you were empty. You were powerful, but you were alone. You had everything except the things that actually make life worth living. Songjia opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. Because she was right. Every word was undeniably, painfully right. Marta's voice softened. I choose to give what little I have through love and faith. I choose to build connections instead of walls. I choose to serve instead of dominate. Tell me, Songjia, which one of us sleeps better at night? Which one of us is truly rich? Which one of us is people who actually care whether we live or die? Not because of what we can give them, but because of who we are. The question hung in the air between them, and Songjia had no answer. He stood there on the stairwell, this woman who had nothing confronting him about the emptiness of having everything, and something inside him finally shattered. Not broke, shattered, like glass that had been cracking for weeks, finally giving way under the pressure of undeniable truth. He sank down onto the concrete steps, his legs suddenly unable to hold him. And then, for the second time since meeting Marta, he cried. But this time, it wasn't the desperate tears of a cornered animal. These were tears of recognition, of grief for a life wasted chasing the wrong things, of shame for all the people he'd hurt to build a kingdom of sand. I don't know how to be different, he whispered, his voice breaking. This is all I know. Taking, controlling, trusting no one. I don't know how to give. I don't know how to love. I don't even know what that looks like. Marta sat down beside him, and after a moment, she put her hand on his shoulder. The touch was gentle, without expectation, without fear. Then learn. You're learning already, even if you don't see it. Every day, you show up to work instead of running. Every time you're kind to a tenant. Every moment you choose to be here, to try, to be better than you were. That's how transformation happens, one choice at a time. What if I can't change enough? What if the person I was is too deeply rooted? The person who got you here, to this moment, where you can finally see clearly, Marta said. That person is dying, Songjia. Let him die. Let go of the power, the pride, the walls you built. They didn't protect you anyway. They just made a bigger target. They sat there for a long time, the sounds of the building continuing around them. Children playing, televisions murmuring, lives being lived by people who would never know they were sitting beside a former crime lord having an existential crisis. Finally, Songjia spoke. I've done terrible things. Hurt people. Destroyed lives for profit. Even if I change now, that doesn't erase what I've done. No, it doesn't, Marta agreed. Redemption isn't erasure. It's acknowledging the harm, accepting responsibility, and choosing to do better going forward. It's understanding that you can't undo the past, but you can refuse to repeat it. Will that be enough? Enough for what? For God? For the universe? For the people you hurt? Marta stood, offering him her hand. I don't know, but it has to be enough for you. You have to decide that being a better person today matters, even if it doesn't change yesterday. That's the only way forward. Songjia took her hand and let her pull him up. In that moment, he made a choice. Not a grand declaration or dramatic vow, just a quiet internal shift. He would try. He would learn to give instead of take. He would learn to serve instead of dominate. He would learn to build connections instead of walls. He didn't know if he could succeed, but Marta had given away her last one to save an elderly woman's life, and she was still standing, still smiling, still somehow believing that tomorrow would be okay. If she could have that kind of faith with nothing, maybe he could learn to have it too. The following weeks brought a transformation that Songjia himself barely recognized. He threw himself into the work with genuine effort, not just to pass time, but because it mattered. He started arriving early to help Marta with the hardest tasks. He used his old organizational skills to make their workflow more efficient, allowing them to finish faster and actually have time to rest. But more than the work, he began to see people differently, not as assets or threats or tools, but as human beings with their own struggles and dignity. He learned that Mr. Park in 205 was a veteran dealing with PTSD, that the single mother in 315, whose name was Juwu, had escaped an abusive marriage and was rebuilding her life one exhausting day at a time, that young Minji dreamed of becoming a doctor someday. He found himself caring about these people, actually caring whether they were okay, whether they had what they needed, whether their lives improved. It was a foreign feeling, caring without calculating what he'd get in return, but it was also oddly freeing. One evening, he helped Mr. Park fix a leaking faucet the landlord had ignored for weeks. The veteran had been too proud to ask for help, but Songja had noticed and offered. When he finished, Mr. Park shook his hand with genuine gratitude. "Thank you," the older man said. "It's rare to find someone who actually cares these days." Such a simple statement, but it meant more to Songja than any expression of fear or respect he'd received in his criminal days. This man trusted him, appreciated him, not because he had to, but because he chose to. Songja started accompanying Marta to her church on Sundays. He didn't understand all the theology, didn't know if he believed in any God after the life he'd lived. But he understood the community there, the way people genuinely cared for each other, the way they shared burdens without expectation of repayment. It was the opposite of every social structure he'd known, and it fascinated him. "You're smiling more," Marta observed one day as they walked home from a particularly exhausting shift. "I don't think I've seen you genuinely smile before this week." Songja touched his face, surprised. "I didn't realize. You look lighter, like you're carrying less weight." He thought about that. She was right. The constant paranoia, the need to control everything, the exhausting maintenance of fear-based respect, it was all gone. He had nothing to protect anymore, no empire to defend, no reputation to uphold. Just a simple life of honest work and genuine human connection. "I think I'm learning what you meant," he said, "about being rich in the ways that matter." Marta's smile was radiant. "I'm proud of you, Songja. Real change is hard. You're doing it." But peace, Songja was learning, was fragile. And the past had a way of finding you, no matter how well you hid. It was Marta who first noticed a man watching them. She developed good instincts living alone in a foreign country. And something about the way this man stood across the street, pretending to smoke while his eyes tracked their every move, set off her internal alarms. "Songja," she said quietly as they left the building after their shift. "Don't look now, but there's someone watching us." Black jacket, across the street. Songja's blood ran cold. He knew what this meant even before he risked a casual glance. The man was one of Cobra's lieutenants. He recognized the stance, the way the man held himself. "They've been found. We need to leave," Songja said urgently, taking Marta's arm. "Now, don't go home. Don't go anywhere you usually go." "What's happening?" "My past has caught up with me." He steered them toward a busier street, his mind racing through options that all ended badly. "I'm so sorry, Marta. I never should have let you get close to me. I should have known they'd eventually find me." They made it 3 blocks before 2 more men appeared, boxing them in. These weren't police. These were Cobra's men, and the looks on their faces promised violence. The leader stepped forward, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Cobra's been looking for you, Songja. Figured you'd eventually surface. We've been watching this building for days." Imagine our surprise when we found the mighty crime boss playing janitor. "Let her go," Songja said, positioning himself between Marta and the men. "She has nothing to do with this." "Oh, but she does now," the man laughed. "Cobra says to give you a message. Tomorrow night, midnight, the old warehouse on the pier. Come alone, or we start killing people in this building. 1 every hour until you show up. We'll start with her." One of the men grabbed Marta roughly, and she cried out. Songja's old instincts roared to life. The knowledge of exactly how to hurt these men, where to strike to disable them quickly. He could probably take 2 of them before the 3rd got a weapon out. But there were more watching from the shadows, and Marta would be caught in the crossfire. "Midnight tomorrow," the leader repeated, shoving Marta back towards Songja. "Don't be late." And don't even think about running. We know where everyone you care about lives." They disappeared into the crowd, leaving Songja and Marta standing on the busy street, while oblivious pedestrians flowed around them. Marta was shaking, and Songja felt the full weight of his guilt crushing down on him. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, leading her to a quiet side street. "I never meant to drag you into my world. I should have stayed away from you, from everyone." "What are you going to do?" Marta asked, her voice steadier than her trembling hands. "I don't know yet, but I won't let them hurt you or anyone else in that building. That's my responsibility." They went back to his apartment, both of them too shaken to separate. Songja paced while Marta sat on the worn mattress, processing everything. Finally, she spoke. "You could run. Leave Seoul entirely. They can't chase you forever. They can, and they will. And while I'm running, they'll kill innocent people to draw me out. I can't let that happen." "Then what? You fight? You go back to being what you were?" That was the question that had been tearing through Songja's mind since the confrontation. He had options, terrible options that the old version of himself would have taken without hesitation. He could contact his old network, the few loyal soldiers who hadn't turned on him, men who would kill for him if he called. He could rebuild his power base, use violence to reclaim his position. He knew how to do it. The strategies, the brutality required, the fear he needed to generate. He could become Songja the crime lord again, destroy Cobra and Jae-sung, make everyone remember why they used to fear his name. The old him would have already made those calls, would have been planning the counterattack, calculating casualties, preparing for war. But he wasn't that person anymore. Or, at least, he was trying not to be. "There's another way," Songja said slowly, the idea forming as he spoke. "A way that doesn't involve going back to violence. But it's risky, very risky. Tell me." He explained his plan, and as he did, Marta's eyes widened with fear and something else, hope. It was a desperate gamble, one that could end with both of them dead. But it was the only path that didn't require him to betray everything he'd learned, everything he was trying to become. "That's insane," Marta said when he finished. "Probably. You could die. Yes. But if it works..." She looked at him with those warm, steady eyes that had seen through his walls from the beginning. "If it works, you'll have chosen love over fear, grace over vengeance. You'll have proven that people can really change. Or I'll have proven that I'm a fool who got us both killed." Marta stood and took his hands in hers. "Then we die as people who chose the right path. That's better than living as monsters, Songja. You taught me that. I taught you that. We taught each other." "I'm scared," he admitted, and saying it aloud felt like shedding another layer of armor he'd worn for so long. "Good. Fear means you value something. For the first time in your life, you have something real to lose. That's growth." The next day, Songja made a phone call he never thought he'd make. Detective Park had been one of the few honest cops in Seoul, someone Songja had actually respected even while bribing his superiors. If anyone would listen to a wanted criminal's testimony, it would be him. "This is Songja," he said when the detective answered. "Yes, that's Songja. I want to make a deal." The conversation was tense, full of threats and suspicion, but Songja laid it all out. He would testify against everyone, Jae-sung, Cobra, every corrupt official, every criminal operation he knew about. He would dismantle the entire network from the inside. In exchange, protection for Marta and the tenants of the building, and a reduced sentence for cooperation. "You'll still do significant prison time," Detective Park warned. "I know. I deserve it. I've done terrible things. But at least this way, I'm choosing to make it right." "Why now? Why after all these years?" Songja looked at Marta, who was listening from across the room. "Because someone showed me that redemption is possible. That it's never too late to choose a better path. And I'd rather die trying to be better than live as the monster I was." Detective Park agreed to the plan. That night, at midnight, Songja walked into the warehouse alone. Cobra was there with Jae-sung and a dozen armed men. They smiled like predators who'd cornered their prey. "The fallen king," Cobra mocked. "Come to beg for mercy?" "No," Songja said calmly. "I came to offer you everything. All my hidden accounts, all my remaining connections, every asset I buried for emergencies. The locations, the access codes, everything. You can have it all. Jae-sung's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Why? Because I don't want it anymore. That life is dead. Take it all. Just leave the people in that building alone. They're innocent. They have nothing to do with our world. You think we're stupid? Cobra laughed. You think we'll just let you walk away? No, Sonja said quietly. I know you won't, but I also know that everything I told you about those assets, the police heard every word. They're listening right now, and in about 30 seconds, they'll breach this warehouse and arrest everyone here, including me. The color drained from Cobra's face. You're bluffing. Am I? Sonja smiled sadly. You taught me to be ruthless, Cobra. Jae-sung taught me to betray before being betrayed. I'm just using the lessons you gave me, but for something better than revenge. The doors exploded inward. Police flooded the warehouse, Detective Park leading the charge. There was chaos, shouting, guns drawn. Cobra and Jae-sung tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Within minutes, they were all in handcuffs, including Sonja, who surrendered peacefully. As they let him out, Jae-sung spat at him. You're a fool, Sonja. You had a chance to rebuild. You threw it all away. No, Sonja replied, looking past him to where Marta stood outside the police perimeter, tears streaming down her face. I finally found what actually matters. You just never understood what that was. 2 years later, Sonja walked out of prison in a sunlight that felt like a new beginning. His sentence had been reduced significantly for his testimony, which had dismantled 3 criminal organizations and led to the arrest of dozens of corrupt officials. He'd used his time inside to earn his education certificate, learn carpentry, and work with at-risk youth, sharing his story as a cautionary tale. Marta was waiting for him, just as she'd promised in her weekly letters. She'd graduated nursing school, was working at a local hospital, and had saved money for them to start fresh together. Not romantically, just 2 people who'd saved each other, choosing to walk the same path. They went back to the apartment building where it all began. Sonja worked as a carpenter and handyman, helping elderly tenants and families who needed repairs. He volunteered at schools, talking to teenagers about choices and consequences. He attended Marta's church, slowly building faith in something beyond himself. Mrs. Lee was still there, healthier than ever, and she hugged him like a grandson when she saw him. The other tenants welcomed him back, having learned his story and choosing grace over judgment. This was community, real, messy, beautiful community where people knew your worst and chose to see your best. In this story, we learn that true wealth isn't measured by what we possess, but by who we become and the integrity we maintain. Real power isn't dominating others. It's serving them with genuine love. Redemption isn't erasure of the past. It's choosing to be better in the present. The people who transform our lives aren't always the powerful ones on thrones. Sometimes they're humble servants who show us what real strength looks like. Sonja lost his empire and found his soul. He lost everything material and gained everything that mattered. Because in the end, character outlasts status, generosity defeats greed, humility proves stronger than pride, and love always triumphs over fear. Thank you for watching this story of transformation and hope. If it touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that change is possible, that redemption is real, and that it's never too late to choose a better path. Drop a comment below sharing what lesson resonated most with you. Until next time, remember, you are not defined by your worst mistakes, but by your courage to become better.